Welcome to Tech for Good with Bethnal Green Ventures. My name is Paul Miller, and it's fantastic to be joined today by Hyunjoo Jae from Korean impact investing firm Envisioning Partners. Hello, Hyunjoo.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I should explain actually that we have met
Yeah,
before, haven't we?
that's
We met a couple of months ago
right.
when I visited Seoul to
Mhm.
speak at a conference about AI for good. I was a guest of Kakao Impact,
Yeah.
and you were there too. And that trip was so interesting. I learned so much about what's going on in Korea that I thought it'd be great to get you on the show to share a little about your work. So, Hyunjoo, how would you describe what you do at Envisioning Partners to someone you've just met? Can you tell us about a couple of your portfolio companies?
Sure. At Envisioning Partners, we invest in companies that use technology to tackle meaningful global challenges, things like climate change, health, the future of work, and education. I like to say we back businesses that make the world work better. And that's really what drives us at Envisioning Partners every day. My job is basically to find those opportunities to invest, work closely with founders, and help them scale both their impact and their business. For example, of my portfolio companies, there's Phoenix Tailings, which is a US-based rare earth metal company, and they're developing clean extraction and refining solutions for earth metal production, fully aligned with highest environmental standards, which is quite different from the conventional method in the market. We first invested in this company in the summer of 2023 before rare earth material became such a big geopolitical issue. I think our focus as an impact investor on socially important problems helped us move a bit faster to spot this opportunity. And another quite different example would be Inuma, which is an edtech startup creating self-learning tools for children who don't have access to quality education. It was actually the very first investment I made as an impact investor back in 2019. Later that year, Inuma won the Global Learning X Prize after like a 2-year-long field test in Tanzania, and they proved the children using their tablet-based learning software, even without any adult supervision, made real progress in reading and math. And today, Inuma sells their self-learning solutions in emerging markets through the partnerships with the government and NGOs, and also sells their products directly to the families in the B2C markets of developed countries. And they're showing every day that great education tools for underprivileged children are just great education tools, period.
That's amazing. What was it that first drew you into impact investing? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Was this the kind of work you always imagined yourself doing? Have you been doing this for your whole career, or is this something more recent?
I used to work in the early stage of my career. I used to work in a private equity, just really the conventional investor. The time really changed my view about the work and the world was 2008 financial crisis. I worked through the 2000 financial crisis. Before then, like every other probably investor, I was so focused on every deals I was working on, like returns, executions, results. And it's very hard to take a really the big picture when you're engaged with these transactions. Uh, at the financial crisis, I kind of I started to see how the capital markets affect society, and started to ask what does my work really mean to the society, and can capital actually be a force for good? Could it create sustainability, not just a profit? And that question stayed with me after that for a while. And later on, when I really came across the concept of impact investing, it immediately clicked. And it felt like, that's the work I was kind of meant to do, and combining the rigor of finance with a real sense of purpose. So that was kind of how I drove into the world of impact investing.
Yeah. And how did you arrive at the impact areas that you work on at Envisioning Partners? How do you prioritize them when you're selecting investments as well? Because I mean, I thought when we met, it was quite interesting that, your impact areas very, very
Yeah.
similar to the ones that we have at Bethnal Green Ventures. So I'm just interested in how you arrived at those.
Yeah, I think that's because we are probably in a pretty similar context.
Mhm.
I mean, at Envisioning Partners, we practice impact investing in the developed markets like Korea and to a lesser extent in the US as well. And our goal is really to find problems that can be solved through technology and business while also creating commercially meaningful markets and investing in companies targeting to solve these problems. That's why our key areas are climate tech, health solutions, future of work, and education. They are places where innovation can drive both social progress and the real market economic growth, especially in the context of developed markets. So that's that was really the thought process we had at the early stage of envisioning partners. And when we evaluate an investment and prioritize the investment opportunities, we always ask, does solving this problem make business sense? And is the impact built into the model, not added later? So that are the two key questions when we evaluate our investments.
Yeah, and as we're going into that a bit, how would you describe the differences between how sort of impact and tech for good startups and firms operate in Korea versus Europe versus the US? Because you've got a really interesting perspective on this because you invest in the US. I think you obviously know a lot about the Korean market, but you've also got experience in Europe as well. What do you see as the differences between how this works in those different contexts?
I think probably daily jobs would not be very different,
Yeah.
but in Korea, venture ecosystem has been traditionally shaped by the public sector. The government policy funds and the capital have played a big role. And while that's gradually changing, still accounts for a large part of the market. Naturally, the impact investing ecosystem evolved within that context. So it has basically a policy-driven nature, especially on the LP side. Compared with Europe or the UK, where impact investing has a deeper and longer social roots and a clearer definition, Korea and the US define impact, I think, more kind of flexibly, I would
Hmm.
say, and are a bit more like a tolerant of ambiguity when it comes to measurement. I think that's partly because both ecosystem grew out of this venture capital context at its origination, which by nature embraces more uncertainty and risk, not just financially, but also in impact itself. So I think an impact venture investor in Korea take not only financial risk, but also impact risk. Sometimes at an early stage of company building, how they define and redefine impact can be fluid, while problem orientation is and should be solid. So I think that
That's
could
really
be.
interesting. So yeah, so there's just as much in some ways uncertainty around the impact side of things as to the business model side of things when
Yeah,
in the investing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And do you think there are differences in terms of the founder mindset in different
Mhm.
parts of the world that you come across? Is it you get different levels of ambition, different levels of like commitment to
Mhm.
impact in different parts of the world?
I don't think founders are that different
Hmm.
across the regions. I mean, founders who are truly impact driven, whether they're in Seoul, London, or San Francisco, share the same DNA. But the only difference I kind of observed, I mean, it's hard to generalize, but
Yeah.
in many cases, I mean, I don't know much about the founders in Europe and UK, but the founders in the US seems to be more kind of investor ready
Yep.
and familiar with the language of capital markets and the normal capital markets. And they feel more kind of comfortable with a board and
Mm.
communicating with a multiple like investors. I think that's really the basically the cultural difference and how they kind of grew up
Yeah.
in the
Sort of,
business world.
yeah, kind of investment literacy almost of like sort of
Yes, that's right.
understanding all the language and so on. Yeah, no, I think that's something that we've seen as well. And I was super impressed with what I saw in Korea when I came to visit in terms of the tech for good. Are there things that you think that other parts of the world could learn from what's going on in
Mhm,
Korea
mhm.
at the moment, and maybe vice versa? Are there things where Korea you think needs to learn from other parts of the world?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of mutual learning ahead. I think from probably Europe and the US, Korea could learn to build like a long-term patient capital. I think we are still short of that deep capital base for tolerant and patient capital, and also the institutional frameworks that reward impact outcome over time. But from Korea, I think Western markets probably could learn about like a speed and execution. When government capital and entrepreneurs align, things move fast. In Korea, impact investing started really in early 2010s,
Mm,
and we are at where we are after probably 20 years of time, which I think is a remarkable achievement in a short period of time. So the lessons learned in that PD execution might be something we could share
yeah.
with the other part of the world.
I think one of the other things that struck me was uh, the relationship between big companies and the
Hmm.
startup ecosystem in Korea seems very mature. You've got lots of corporate venture capital that
Yes.
some of which is focused on impact as well, isn't it? That seems to be something that's quite different from the UK.
Yeah, I mean that's very true, and that's actually more true in the impact investing markets. And looking back at an early stage of envisioning partners, we actually worked more easily with the corporate LPs than the traditional like a financial like uh, LPs, not because of their kind of the intent, but because of strategic orientation.
Mm,
And they pursue the strategic fit and the synergy as well as the financial profit. And kind of our clear definition of investment domains and the clear orientation toward these problems can easily resonate with the corporate investors. So
yeah.
when they pursue the open innovation with the startups, I think it works very well with the impact driven startups and the investors, and that's quite strongly observed in the Korean market.
Yeah, definitely. So you talked about this idea of I think you call it collinearity.
Yeah.
This idea of like that where business growth and social impact are
Mhm.
aligned. Can you talk a little bit more about that, and how do you assess it when you're first like sort of
Mhm.
meeting a startup or assessing a startup?
Yeah.
Now are there cases where you sort of where people maybe say they've got collinearity, but you don't believe them?
Yeah. Uh, I mean, we look for business models where the more successful the company becomes, the greater its positive impact. That's basically collinearity. If scaling directly, for example, if scaling directly reduces carbon emissions or expands access to essential services, that's true collinearity. The red flag is when impact feels like a side project. I mean, they claim that it's their core of their business, but I mean, sometimes it is not. It's more like a marketing story or like a kind of the decoration that are true business drivers. That's usually when growth ends up like diluting impact, not
Mm.
amplifying. So that's kind of the very important criteria when we make our investment decision.
Do you find it's easier in one area of impact than others? Are there sort of is it easier in sustainability than it is in the future of work, for example, or is it something that you find is similar in different fields?
I mean, where the kind of the collinearity is clear is I mean climate solutions. I
Yeah.
mean, this is more kind of in some way scientific problem. So the like a relationship between their solution and the final kind of impact and outcome is
Mm,
quite clear from the beginning. But when we come to the social side of impact, I mean, the relationship becomes sometimes kind of multidimensional. So it's not just a linear interaction between the like a cause and effect.
Yeah.
So business model and impact model can kind of evolve over the early phase of company building. So sometimes the collinearity is not clear at the beginning. We are trying to be more tolerant about the ambiguity, especially in that case. The founder's problem orientation and commitment to mission becomes much more important.
Yeah. And are there things that you think that traditional VCs don't quite get or don't quite
Yeah.
understand about impact-driven startups now?
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because you obviously you co-invest also with very sort of
Yeah.
mainstream VCs as well. Are there things you think they don't get yet?
Yeah, I mean, the one big misunderstanding of like a conventional VCs about impact is that the impact startups are kind of a fixed, narrow category.
Hmm.
Uh, as if there's a separate world of like impact founders. But honestly, I think most startups begin with a kind of a problem they want to solve. The question we ask as impact investor is just how meaningful is that problem socially in the context of our time, and how clear and determined is the founder's intent to solve that problem. That clarity of purpose, not not a label, is what defines an impact-driven company. Ironically, as you mentioned, we sometimes meet investors who have funded truly impact-driven business, but they don't realize they are impact startups. And sometimes they kind of deny that they are. Some people even think that if a company makes a lot of money, it's not impact anymore. So that's kind of the mindset we need to and we are trying to change.
Are there signals in Korea and I guess more widely in your work that impact investing is sort of becoming bigger, becoming more mainstream, or
Mhm.
is it all going away? How do you feel about the impact investing at the moment?
I mean, yes and no, basically. I mean, in terms of scale, I mean, it's clearly getting bigger. So in that sense, we are seeing clear signs of mainstreaming. I mean, basically, tech for good becomes central to solving like a climate, energy, and demographic challenges. So there has been an explosion of capital flowing into climate tech, like a mission-driven innovation. So in that sense, it shows that the investor finally see how existential and investable these problems are. But I think one thing clearly missing is intentionality. So that's kind of that's what makes me kind of hesitate to say it's truly becoming a mainstream. Many investors back in fact impactful businesses without ever saying, "This is why we're doing it. This is the impact we aim to achieve."
Mm.
And I mean, in their underlying thought process, I mean, especially for the early stage venture investors, they have this kind of vague impact orientation, and they all kind of want to create a kind of good for the world and want to solve the meaningful problems in the current time. But but they do not have the clarity of purpose,
Yep.
so that they do not really communicate their thought process in a more systematic way. So I think that is some kind of a hurdle we need to overcome. And in another kind of the perspective, one challenge I kind of observe while we observe mainstreaming at the same time is politicization. I
Mm.
say politicization in some markets like impact, ESG, or even climate became like a polarizing words. It's unfortunate because at the core, this is really simply about building resilient and long-lasting, future-ready business. So yes, impact is moving toward the mainstream, but true mainstreaming will come when we see it, impact investing or tech for good investing, as just smart investing, more informed investing with a longer term view, not like a political statement.
Yeah. And just finally, on a more personal note, like, what do you love about your job? What do you really enjoy about your role at Envisioning Partners? And are there some bits that you maybe you enjoy a little bit less? So what are the pros and cons of being
Yeah.
a tech for good investor in Korea?
Yeah. Despite all the challenges, what keeps me like hopeful and what I love most about this work is the people, the founders especially, who may wake up every day with a clear mission to solve real problems of our world. Their optimism is contagious. So that's really the part I love most. And the part I don't like, I would say the hardest part is being patient.
Mm. Yeah.
I think impact takes time, and knowing we can't fix all the problems at the same time. We always need to tackle one problem at a time. So that's like probably the hardest part of my job. But every time I see like one of my portfolio companies grew without losing its sense of purpose, it reminds me why I'm doing this work.
That's great. Well, Hyunjoo, thank you so much for joining us today on Tech for Good. You've got suggestions for guests or topics we should be covering on Tech for Good, do get in touch. And if you're thinking of starting a Tech for Good venture and looking for investment, don't forget to check out bethnalgreenventures.com to see whether we might be able to help. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening and goodbye.